So good morning, everyone. Thanks for getting out of bed very early. Let's start with a little quiz. How many people live in Africa? Who knows the number? All right, the Africans right here. Yeah, they should know. 1.2 billion, absolutely. 2050, how many people are going to live there? 2.2 billion. All right, okay. If you then do the math and you say that's only 30 years from now, and you divide it and you do the rough math, that means Africa is growing by roughly 35 million people every year. Now that's a huge challenge, and especially if we come to education, and Fred will talk about that in a second. If you do the numbers and you just say 2% should go on to tertiary education, that means you have roughly 70,000 students at a university every year on top. If you then say the average intake is roughly 7,000 a year, that would give you the need for 10 new universities every single year. Now, I don't know, how do 10 universities a year come into being? The African states aren't exactly known for building out the education sector in a very aggressive way. Something needs to give, something needs to happen. And there are entrepreneurs out there who think through African education in a different way, who are looking at it to disrupt it. And Fred Swaniker is one of them. So welcome, Fred. Thanks for making your way to warm and balmy Munich. Absolutely fantastic to have you here. Why don't you start telling us about yourself, where you grew up, and how you got into this all?
Thanks, Martin. And good morning, everybody. So I'm originally from Ghana, but I left Ghana at the age of 4. Mm-hmm. And every 4 years of my life, I moved to a different country on the continent. I started my career initially with McKinsey company in South Africa. I did work across the continent. And I've been involved in several startup ventures for the last 20 years. So what all this experience of living and working in different parts of Africa did is two things. One is it made me very passionate about Africa. Second, it showed me that we have tremendous potential. But this potential was being held back by the quality of our leaders. And so that really made me think that get some makeup on stage. Okay, I guess you can hear me clearer. So yeah, grew up across Africa, passionate about the continent, saw the need for us to develop better leaders to really move us forward. The other aspect of my background is that my family's been involved in education institutions for several generations. So my grandmother started a school, my mother started a school, and then when I was 18, my dad passed away. And my mother had a full-time job, and she couldn't run the school, so she made me the headmaster of the school at the age of 18. And I ran the school for a year and, taught and managed the teachers. And so that's kind of how I got in. It's something that's you can say it's in my DNA.
But the first formal school that you started, that you fundraised for, was the African Leadership Academy in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, maybe just to give you maybe just take a step back. So you mentioned earlier about the demographic challenges that Africa is facing. Everyone talks about, the large numbers, population. We're going to be 40% of the world's population by the end of the century. And typically when we look at that, we think doom and gloom, right? The Africans are coming over the Mediterranean, migration, security issues, and we're scared. And there's lots of crisis. But I think we're missing the point. In that population is the next Elon Musk. He's South African, in case you didn't know that, right? SpaceX, Tesla, all these things came out of a South African. The first heart transplant in the world was done by a South African doctor. The rover robot that NASA sent to explore Mars was built by a Ghanaian scientist who works at NASA. So many of the world's greatest innovators have come out of Africa. But that's happened despite the poor education systems that exist there, right? So what the world is missing is that actually the greatest opportunity for prosperity and innovation this century is going to come from Africa. Because the average age of a German is what? Who knows what the average age of a German is? The median age of a German.
I don't know,
47.
50?
47.
All right, there we are.
And the median age of an African? 19.5.
Wow.
So the youngest population in the world, the fastest growing population in the world, and the greatest source of untapped talent in the world sits in Africa. And so this, for me, is not about a problem for the world. It's actually a great opportunity for the world. The greatest source of prosperity and innovation that's going to come this century. So what we've been doing over the last 15 years is really, we've been on a journey to unlock this talent. And we are doing this not just for Africa's benefit, but for the world's benefit, so that we can solve many of the world's biggest challenges from our largest pool of untapped talent. And so, you know, we started the African Leadership Academy, a high school in South Africa to do that, and then the African Leadership University, and then a business school. And then now we're developing a series of innovative lifelong learning centers. So essentially, we've been trying to unlock this talent pool at increasing scale and reducing cost in more innovative ways over the last 15 years. And our goal is to develop 3 million leaders and entrepreneurs and innovators over the next 6,000 days.
Before we get into the big picture and the 3 million, you sort of only mentioned it on the side, and then we started universities. Here's a guy who actually started 2 universities within the last, 5 years? 2 campuses. It's actually 3 now. So how do you start a university? What was the idea behind it? Why were they not just another university started by a state, but something completely different?
Well, when you have such a fast-growing population, and we have very few resources and very limited time, you have to think very unconventionally. You can't use the same vehicle that everyone else has been using. And this is also one of the wonderful things about Africa, because innovation comes out of constraints, and there's lots of constraints in Africa, right? Yeah. So we realized that we needed to completely reimagine education. You know, it's very simple. It's like if you were 20 years ago looking at building a bookstore. Would you build a bookstore, or would you start Amazon.com? You would start Amazon.com. So building a traditional university today is like building a bookstore. You need to reimagine and think about education for the future, not for the past. So, you know, when we set out to build the university, we said, let's use our clean slate in Africa. Because many of our students from the academy were going to study overseas, and we said, we need our own world-class university in Africa. Let's do it differently. And so there's, today, most education is what I would call just-in-case education. You learn lots of facts and figures just in case it becomes relevant to you someday. The fact is, most people end up in jobs that have nothing to do with what they studied in college.
I vividly remember that.
Right? And yet, universities today focus on teaching you many facts and figures. We live in a world where information is ubiquitous. It's no longer about facts and figures. So what we believe is in just-in-time education. And just-in-time education has 3 characteristics. Number 1, it never ends. You enter, but you never graduate, because you need to keep reinventing yourself and continuously learn.
Lifelong learning.
Lifelong learning. Number 2, the purpose of this kind of education is not to teach you facts and figures. You can look it up on online. You can, knowledge is no longer a scarce commodity. It's ubiquitous everywhere.
Google is there.
Google is there. So the purpose of education should be teaching you how to learn. It's about learning how to learn so that you can keep learning new things just in time as you need it and as the world evolves. That's how you fight artificial intelligence and robotics. You have to create self-learning, agile people who can constantly reinvent themselves. And the purpose of this learning, which the 3rd characteristic is to become a problem solver. So today, universities give you a menu of academic disciplines. A Bachelor of Arts in History, Bachelor of Science in Chemistry. What we really believe is you need to give young people a menu of the world's biggest problems: healthcare, education, climate change, infrastructure, and the greatest opportunities as well that they faces, right? So how do you unlock the talent pool, agriculture, all those kind of things? And then so what we do is we ask our young people not to choose an academic major, but rather to declare a mission. How are you going to solve these problems? And then you curate your own learning experiences around the problems that you want to solve.
And do you do that in the traditional context of a university? So you have professors, you have buildings. How does it work?
That's a very good question. So when we looked at the problem or the opportunity to unlock all of Africa's talent, we realized that we were missing one thing, which is professors, right? If you're going to build a university today, you think, well, you need professors. The only problem is we don't have time to develop all the professors in the world. We have 6,000 days before we have the largest workforce in the world. So we realized that we needed to flip the model and not build a university system around a scarce resource of professors with PhDs, but around an abundant resource, which is students. So it's a student-driven university. They learn by themselves. They can curate all the content and curriculum that exists in the whole world.
Online courses?
Online courses. But it's important to realize that online education alone doesn't really work.
Why not?
It's lonely. That's why only 6% to 8% of people finish these MOOCs, right? Education is a social activity. You learn from each other. You learn by engaging and solving problems.
So the campus setting is an important thing.
It's an important thing, but it's important for these young people to come together. So they do a lot of peer-to-peer learning.
Yes.
And then do a lot of project-based learning. They're solving problems. They're applying what they're learning online to solve problems. And so it's self-directed learning, peer learning, and then you still have some facilitators who come to class, but now you only have to go to class maybe once a week instead of 3 times a week, like in traditional university. So with that, we've been able to completely reinvent learning, and we can open a new university in 3 months, it costs less than $1,000.
$1,000
a year.
A year per student.
Per student, no. Yeah.
So that is in the comparison to the United States, a 4-year undergrad degree now all in is going to cost you roughly what, $250,000, $300,000?
Yeah, for 3 years.
All right, that is
years.
the upfront investment you need to make in a single individual, and that model clearly is broken. I mean, there was just one college that went bust in the United States. They just stopped taking students because for them they were the first ones to really fall off the line. I think we're going to see that in the coming years. Now you brought the cost down to $4,000 for 4 years, sort of as the equivalent.
Yeah, we've actually made the degree 3 years as well because we looked at college degrees in the U.S. If you go to let's name Princeton, and you pay that $280,000 for 4 years. If you actually go and study the academic calendar, you find that they're on vacation for about 5 to 6 months of the year. By the time you do summer break, spring break, and everything. So we don't have time to be on vacation in Africa. So we cut out the vacation. And rather, students spend 8 months in learning, 4 months in work. So in 3 years, you get as much education as a 4-year degree, but you're much better prepared for the world as well.
Now, the big challenge, of course, now let's come back to the numbers.
And at $3,000 for the full 3 years.
Wow. So let's come back to the numbers. Now, while sort of the unit economics look absolutely fabulous and attractive, you now need to scale this to make an impact. What's the kind of scale that you're thinking about?
Initially, when we set out on this goal, we thought we would build 25 campuses with 10,000 students each to bring this talent to central points. But we realized that there's too much cost involved in that because people have to get air tickets, then they have to stay in accommodation and so forth. So now we're taking our model closer to many, many different cities. So we're looking now to build perhaps 200 sites to be training 1 million people at a time.
Wow. And you want to do that by when?
In 6,000 days.
Okay. The clock is counting. Speaking of which, we're 1 minute left. Questions to, we just heard from American Express. Let's hear it from the African Express. There's a hand up there on the right. And a microphone approaching you rapidly.
Hey. Very great panel, thank you. Do European countries already reach out to you to look at a white label for what you are building? Because I know education in this country is very slow when it comes to changing, and next to me there is one lady very passionate about the topic, so I think this would be a great white label for many countries in this world.
No, thank you. Well, I mean, I did mention earlier that Africa is going to be the source of innovation in many, many ways for the world. So what we are doing, we don't see it as an African innovation. We see it as a global innovation education. So the 200 sites that we're looking at, I would see 100 in Africa and 100 in the rest of the world. So we'll be here soon.
Okay, with that, we're actually almost there. One more question. We would have the time over there on my left. Let's pass the cube. It's a new one. I haven't seen that.
Do your universities also teach basic sciences like molecular biology, quantum physics, this sort of thing? Or is it more management?
We do everything. We do, our students are working on artificial intelligence. They're working on robotics. They're building drones. We do business, engineering, computer science. So all of that is accessible to our young people. We want to create the problem solvers of the future, and we've got a new, innovative way to do it: faster, cheaper, more effective, and more aligned with where the world is going.
Wonderful. There were lots more hands up. I think we've just run out of time. So Fred's going to stick around, and I'm sure he'll be happy to answer your question. Fred, thank you so much for making it to Munich.
Thank you.
What a fantastic idea.